This takes a village, that's for sure. I want to thank Talitha Guinn-Shaver, who's our presenter today, for taking her time and coming to us virtually to do a presentation training that's going to be really helpful to us in this time. And I really want to thank all of you for believing in the mission of the partnership and for taking the time to come and join us and to learn and to take back into your communities whatever you are able to take out of today's event. They say that you know, our focus, the title of our event this year was supposed to be 2020 Focus on Solutions, and of course that's changed a little bit, and we're really focusing on some new kinds of solutions that we hadn't really thought about when we planned this event months ago. As someone recently said, and I have to agree, we don't need to think outside the box now. We really need to get a whole new box. So with that, thank you and good morning. I'm going to turn it over to Chevelle Mavens, who is our committee, Education Committee co-chair.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. Our presenter today is Talitha Guinn-Shaver. She served as the Elder Multidisciplinary Team Technical Advisor for the Elder Justice Initiative at the U.S. Department of Justice. Her experience with MDTs include her prior role as Director of the Elder Abuse Prevention Program at the Institute on Aging, where she served as the Director of their San Francisco Elder Abuse Forensic Center and Chair of their San Francisco Elder Abuse MDT. She has also participated in other MDT models, such as serving on their San Francisco Elder Death Review Team and the Hoarding and Cluttering Taskforce. She has also proudly served the National Center on Elder Abuse, working on elder abuse special projects. Today, Talitha will be presenting the information on creating and adapting MDTs to our current environment. A copy of the updated PowerPoint is available on our website. It's all yours, Talitha.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today, and I hope that we can think together about some of the challenges that we are experiencing in this current environment, and more importantly, ways to work through those challenges. So if you had looked at a previous version of this PowerPoint, it looked a little different than what we're going to be discussing today. And I think that's probably a common thing in everyone's world, that things are just a little bit fluid right now and changing. So I'm going to get my PowerPoint up, and here we go. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Elder Justice Initiative and our project. We're going to very lightly touch upon some basic MDT foundational information, and then we're going to talk about what we know about strong MDTs and how to adapt these teams to the current environment. We'll also give you some tips and resources to bolster your team. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I'm hearing another voice on the screen. Can somebody, one of the other presenters chime in and tell me if you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, okay,
yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So the Elder Justice Initiative is housed within the Department of Justice, and we really try to support all of their programmatic and enforcement efforts around elder abuse, neglect, and financial fraud and scams. This is sort of a large task, and the MDT project is just one of many projects within the Elder Justice Initiative. We also work a lot on developing and supporting research, on helping to support local efforts through training and resources, and developing informational pages for victims and their families so that people know where to turn for help. If you haven't gone over to elderjustice.gov in a while, I really highly recommend that you do, because there's just such a wealth of information for various professionals and the public that's free and accessible to everyone. The MDT Technical Assistance Project is really here to serve you. Our mission is to provide the tools, resources, and individualized consultations to facilitate and expand the elder abuse case review multidisciplinary team model across the nation. And we do this by responding to requests for materials. We provide phone consultations. So if you're just starting a team or you've had a team going for a long time, but you've run into some challenges or obstacles, you can call and get a personalized consultation. We also sometimes go out into the community and meet with teams and see if there's a way that we can work together to support these teams as they're developing in the community. Sometimes we'll host either little one-day working retreats, or we'll even do regional trainings. And so we're very open to supporting the MDT model in the community wherever it's found and wherever that support is needed. We provide a lot of educational materials such as webinars that are cataloged on our website. And we also have an MDT guide and toolkit that's available that will walk you through the various things to consider when starting an MDT. We also just recently launched an Elder Abuse Network map, and the idea is to look at all of the networks across the country that are serving older adults. So not just MDTs, but any group that is working on elder abuse or elder justice issues in their community. We are inviting them to share at least their location and some basic contact information, and we're trying to put everyone on a map so that we can get a visual and help one another connect who are doing this really good work. I think this is work that has for a long time been a very siloed endeavor. And we're hoping to kind of break down some of those silos and help people who are working in this field collaborate and even know that one another are doing the work. I think that I've had a lot of consultations with teams who don't even know that in the next county over there is another team doing this work and that they could be supporting one another. So what are we talking about when we talk about MDTs? I'm going to use a really broad definition here today, and then we're going to talk a little bit more narrowly about teams that are doing case review. So taking a step back, MDTs are really defined as representatives from 3 or more disciplines who work collaboratively, who are bound by a common purpose. So this could really be anything. This model grew out of a medical setting where it was determined that simply providing a medical perspective was not serving certain clients very well. And so MDTs were developed to look at the biopsychosocial needs of individuals. So to make sure that the whole individual was better represented when developing care plans. And so this model has been adapted by lots of communities. Child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence, and other fields have taken this MDT model and have grown it in really wonderful ways. I always say if you have seen one MDT, you have seen one MDT. There are no two MDTs that are really exactly alike. Even when you have directors who have helped form multiple MDTs in their area, each one of those MDTs is going to look a little different, function a little differently. But overall, here are some of the common core members that can be found on a multidisciplinary team. Adult Protective Services, Aging Service Network personnel, so people who are in the community providing those aging services, geriatricians or physicians, law enforcement, including prosecutors, psychologists or neuropsychologists, where they can be found, victim witness advocates, victim service providers. And more we're also seeing people with financial industry background who are participating on case review MDTs to look at providing some forensic accounting capacity to those teams. But your team could be either something that is really small and simple and it has just grown, and where you maybe have just 2 or 3 representatives from different fields who are working on this issue of elder abuse. Your team doesn't have to have all of these various professionals to be classified as an MDT or even to be functioning well and helping your community. There's all different types of MDTs. We see really broad teams that are looking at elder abuse in general. Maybe they're focusing on policy or education and outreach. And then we also have these sort of cross-sectional teams where older adults are being served and elder abuse may come up, like on hoarding and cluttering teams, mental illness teams, code enforcement teams. I can't tell you how many times code enforcement teams run into elder abuse or neglect when they are investigating their cases. Guardianship teams, etc. So there are lots of different places where we can have intersections of this population and where elder abuse can be a component of these multidisciplinary teams. So when a group decides that they really need an MDT in their area, one of the very first things that they're going to look at is what sort of a structure is going to be appropriate for their community. And this can be a very challenging and daunting first step. There are a lot of models to choose from, and it can be difficult to know when you're starting from square one, what model is really going to be the most appropriate. So I provided a link here, and you can see it in the handouts that have been provided to you as well, to our MDT guide and toolkit that is specifically around meeting the needs of your community. And in this chapter, we also provide a toolkit item that's a worksheet that walks you through the various steps of putting together a community needs assessment, looking externally into the community and looking internally into the systems that are in place to see where the needs exist that your team is hoping to bridge those gaps, to provide some support around those needs. And so even though this is a challenging and can feel daunting task, it is something that can be broken down into simple steps. And so we provided some information about how to do that. We also provide consultations around that subject as well. So you choose a model, and then you start recruiting your participants, because you need to think about who needs to be at the table to really address the issues that you have identified in your needs assessment. So where are these problems, systemic or otherwise, that you're looking to improve upon? And who has the authority, who has the power, who has the passion to make some changes or to collaborate with you? I encourage everybody to be as collaborative as possible in these first stages, because when you're thinking about a multidisciplinary team, you want your effort from the very beginning to include as many disciplines as possible, even those who you might have some conflict with in the community, or where agencies maybe have a history of not working well together, where there could be political differences within the various agencies. In fact, I think that that is where some of the best work is done with these MDTs in their formation stages, is bringing these partners together who maybe view their goals as being in opposition to one another or not always supportive of one another, so that you can figure out ways to bridge those gaps and to resolve some of that conflict. We also have a chapter that's around selecting team members, including some information about how to recruit participants. I think initially getting that buy-in can be challenging. You need to educate the people who are working in your community about this issue and understand why an MDT is a valuable asset, why this team will serve the community, how it will serve the community, and how it will serve the agencies and organizations that participate on the MDT as well. I always say to look for the influencers within an organization, because it's not always the leader. It's not always the person at the top of the organization who is going to understand this issue first. If you can find somebody within the organization who has a passion for older adults or working with older adults and can sort of lead that conversation internally within their own organization, you can really have a lot of success of bringing partners to the table. So I'll give you an example. When I was in San Francisco, we were working on forming our Elder Abuse Forensic Center. There were challenges around bringing police and adult protective services together, and this is a really common challenge. These are people who see their roles, even though they're serving the same clients or there's an overlap in clients, they see their roles very differently. and their functions are very different. So they can have a challenging time coming together and seeing what their common goals and purposes are. And we really began to make headway when we found a sergeant who had an elderly mother, and she was providing care for her elderly mother, and she had encountered elder abuse in her personal life, a caregiver who had been stealing her medications. And so she understood this issue in a personal way, and it was very important to her. And so she was able to engage with her leadership in a way that we were not able to. We could come and say, let's have meetings and have conversations. And sometimes we could get, these people with authority within law enforcement to sit down and talk to us. But it was completely different having a person within that system who understands that system, who understands the hierarchy and has relationships within that system. When she began to advocate with us, it really opened up our capacity to engage with the law enforcement agency there. So we have in this toolkit a worksheet about recruiting participants, and to help you sort of generate some of that initial buy-in, we've taken a lot of research and we've compiled it together for you, and we've put it in a sort of stock letter that you can pull from. So if the people who in your community are feeling some resistance to these teams because they don't understand why they're needed or how prevalent elder abuse is, or if MDT models really work, then you can have all of that research there and cite it in a letter to kind of help bolster your arguments, and then you can customize that letter to the needs of your community. So you get everybody together, you decide you're going to have a team, and you recruit your participants, and then you magically have an MDT, right? I naively thought that when we were forming our Elder Abuse Forensic Center, and it reminds me of when I was pregnant with my first child, and I was telling my doctor, I am so ready to have this baby because I can't sleep. So any parent knows that that is a really hilarious statement, and my doctor laughed and laughed and laughed when I said that. And MDTs are like that. So you have this MDT baby, and then the work really begins. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we know about strong MDTs. What are the fundamentals of a strong MDT? So we looked at the research across multiple disciplines. We looked at child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence. We also looked at medical legal collaborations and all of the research that supports investigations into those teams. And we pulled out what are these 5 sort of key markers of success for an MDT long-term. And I think that we were surprised by what we found. These are not the answers that we thought we would find. So I think they're important to bring to the table early on and discuss within your team as principles to start from. So the first is a sense of shared decision making. So people kind of get scared when you talk about having shared decision making on a team because everybody is holding their own professional responsibilities very closely. They have their own set of obligations, of laws or statutes or other governing material around their profession or their agency. And to talk about shared decision making, that just seems like blowing everything wide open, and it's scary. So we're not talking about having APS tell law enforcement what to do, or law enforcement telling a physician what to do, or a physician telling any other profession at the table what they should do. What we're talking about is the process. So when you're developing this process, allowing those professions to have voice in how you are going to work together, how you're going to come to decisions in your meetings, how you're going to share information, how you are going to collaborate productively. And to also, once you start having these team meetings and getting together as a group, to allow each profession, each agency or team member a voice into the meeting. This is really critical. And it can come up in a variety of ways. So you might have team members who feel like maybe they don't have as much power as the other people in the room, and they're maybe a little afraid to talk. You might have individuals who have a lot of information, a lot of great insight, but they're observers and they tend to be quiet in meetings. So it can be an agency issue, it can be an individual issue where people maybe are not really participating and who are not showing up in sort of this way of bringing their voice into the room. And as a facilitator, there are a lot of ways that you can move around this issue. And I think it's a good practice, even though it might sound a little silly, when you come into the room, to say hello to every person in the room and to get their voice into the room, to physically have a audible response in that room. And those members who are not participating or not speaking as much, to hold space at the end to ask them for their insights, to see if they have anything to contribute, because there can be gold there that they're holding on to and not sure if they maybe not be sure if it's appropriate or a right thing to share with the team. So that's about bringing your voice both in the process of creating your team and within the actual team meetings. And then we want to talk about partnership. Teams that are successful really understand what their partnership is about. They're going to have strong MOUs or other agreements about how they're going to work together. They have a sense of knowing what they're bringing to the table and knowing what they can expect when they are there. And then this third piece is about interdependency, how groups and individuals coming together influence outcomes, and how it's not one agency over here or one team member over there who are alone and driving this and just sort of accepting some random tidbits of information. That if we want to serve the community, if we want to have better outcomes for abused elders, we are interdependent. We are weaving together a system of support for this older adult. And understanding and recognizing that interdependency in our outcomes is essential. Strong teams also have a balance of power. So you may have a single person who runs the meetings. You might have a single person who's maybe the director of a center that is hosting the meeting. You might have people with various levels of power within their profession. But when you come together, as much as possible, try to flatten that hierarchy of power out. Be you in the meetings. Ask people to leave their ego at the door, though you'll want to phrase that a bit more diplomatically than leave your ego at the door. But invite people to come in and to get to know one another on a more personal level, to know that this is Bob and this is Cindy, not just that this is a prosecutor and this is a law enforcement officer. You have to be able to talk to one another. And if there's a sense of power being out of balance, that can shut down communication and collaboration really quickly in a team setting. And then you want to have a clear process. People have to understand how they are going to bring cases to the table. People have to understand what it is that they're working on and how they're going to be working on it together. So whether you're working on policy or education, or you're actually looking at elder abuse cases together, you really need to develop this protocol about how you're going to do the work that you are proposing to do together. Another really critical component of having a strong MDT is to know some basic information about the stages of team development. So your team might have some really brilliant minds with very specialized backgrounds that have wonderful professional information that they can bring to the table. Doctors, lawyers, social workers, community service providers, people who know their world intimately, but their training probably largely did not introduce this concept of working together across disciplines and of team development. So this is sort of something that's more born in the business world, sometimes in social services, but a lot of times teams get together and they get lost in this process and they don't know where they are, so they think they're doing something wrong. And I have been through this personally on teams We were 2 years into the development of our forensic center in San Francisco, and it had looked in the beginning like everything was going to go together so beautifully, and it was not going together beautifully. All the ways that we had decided that we were going to measure success, we were not seeing success in any of those areas. And we had to take a step back and say, where are we in this mess? And luckily, we were part of a larger group of grantees through the Archstone Foundation who had provided not just funding for these teams, but support, peer support, so the teams could help one another. So we're able to lean on teams that had been developed before us by a couple of years and say, oh my goodness, this is where we're finding ourselves. What's happening? Were you here too? And we were in the storming phase of our development. We had not hit a norming phase yet. So it's important to note that you can move anywhere within this sort of group of stages. You can go backwards in your stages or forward in your stages. You can jump around in your stages, but it's important to know where you are and what's happening so that you can move to where you want to be, which is performing. So forming is when everybody's coming together and you have this great honeymoon period. You're all in love and you're going to do great work and save the world, and it's all la la. And then suddenly you find yourself in the storming stage. Now we're having the real work of bringing together these different disciplines, trying to create a shared vision and shared goals out of everyone's needs, what everyone wants to get out of the team, what everybody's hoping to contribute to the clients that they're serving, and working together. And you're going to have to hash through some challenging pieces there: confidentiality, your protocols about how you're going to work together, which information you can share, what your goals even are. Are you leaning towards, we want to see more prosecutions in our community, and yet other team members are like, we want to make sure that we are providing more medical support to abused elders, or more psychological services to elders, or whatever the case may be. You're going to see all of these different valid perspectives and valid goals trying to come together and coalesce into something that works to meet those shared goals and that works to provide better services for older adults, or better outcomes for whatever it is they're working on, community education, policy, etc. And one really great analogy that I had, and I wish we were together so we could do this in person, but maybe next year we can do something like this. But I want you to just for a minute imagine a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All right, this is like the most basic sandwich you can imagine. There's 3 elements. There's bread, peanut butter, and jelly, right? But now I want you to think about your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, your ideal peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And what does that look like compared to what you think the average peanut butter and jelly sandwich looks like, right? So you might not use peanut butter at all. You might use almond butter. You might not use bread. You might prefer to put it on a rice cake. You might not like jelly at all, but you substitute bananas. Everybody's peanut butter and jelly sandwich, their ideal peanut butter and jelly sandwich, is going to be different than yours. And so you're coming together to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And how do you make it work for everybody as a team? How's everybody going to enjoy it and get what they want out of it? It can be more challenging than it seems. But when you come together and you develop a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that helps meet the overall goals, and you've all compromised somewhat on what this is going to be, you enter into the norming stage of team development. And this is where people are beginning to understand what it is that you're doing together. There are some processes in place that they understand. There are relationships that are forming that they are understanding. They know what they're supposed to be contributing to the team. And then you can move to the last stage, which is performing. Now you know what you're doing together and you're delivering. You're getting it down like clockwork. You're going through the motions. Well, you're like a well-oiled machine, right? That goal that we all want to be. You come to the table, you know what your goals are, you're getting it done. And I wish that I could say that once you hit that performing stage, that is where you stay, but the world just is not like that. So you can move backwards to at any point to one of these other stages, because there are so many internal and external influences that your team is going to endure. So you might have turnover in staff or personnel within your team. Your members might change. You might have external environmental factors, political factors, health factors, like we're seeing now with COVID. There's so many things externally that can influence the work of your team and what you're doing together. And at any point, you can go back and say, this is no longer working. Where do we need to hash something out? Where do we need to change what we're doing together, how we're working together? Do we even have the right people at the table? Do we need to bring someone else with some new expertise in? So strong MDTs understand where they are in the process, and they have very clearly defined mission, vision, and goals. And to help you with that piece of it, there's also some information in Chapter 4 on defining what you're doing and creating your mission statement. We also wanted to give you some support around developing your organizational rules. So the most critical piece of this, I'm going to say, is identifying someone to serve as your coordinator or your facilitator. I think a lot of people see this role as being purely administrative. This is not a purely administrative role. This person is a unicorn. This person is the glue that's going to hold your team together. Coordinators hold much more than the agenda. They do a lot more than telling people when to come together or what they're going to come together around, because the coordinator is really that piece, that person who's going to have relationships with everyone on the team and tend to those relationships and to help one another communicate effectively. There are so many pieces that a good coordinator has to have in their skill set that they can be a very challenging person to find. So I want you to think deeply about who can fill that role, and if there's not one individual person, how you can divide that role up among people who can take a leadership role within your team. So maybe there's somebody who can hold the technical side of it. Maybe there's somebody who's really good. They're the chatty Cathy of the group. Every time you come together as a team, they're chatting everybody up. Maybe you can hardly get them to be quiet when it's time to do the work. Well, that person is probably the person who's really going to help your team form those relationships, help bridge those gaps, help introduce people to one another. There's many roles that this coordinator can play that can be divided up amongst people. And I also want to say you can find funding for this individual. So I think a lot of teams try to forge ahead without having a coordinator. I have not seen that done successfully, I hate to say. I think people usually, they hit a wall and they can't figure out why, because they have all these other pieces in place. But if you want to look at our website, we have information about VOCA funding that can be used for your coordinator, and there are also various other grants that you could apply to. But the coordinator is critical. Let's see here, what's the other most critical piece of this? I would say developing strong MOUs. We have MOUs that you can draw from, take and adapt, protocols as well that you can take and adapt. All of these organizational pieces at the beginning. Do these things as early in the process as you can, so that you're not showing up 3 or 4 years into your effort and not understanding why these things aren't working, why your team isn't functioning the way you're hoping it would. And if you're there, it's okay. Now you know where to go back and the things to look at. Strong teams also understand that this is not something that you create one time and then it's done. This is a really very dynamic relationship. This is like a marriage, right? And so you don't get married and say, okay, now we're married and everything is going to be perfect. You're going to have to refine your work as you proceed. There are going to be things that are going to change. And so you have to understand that you're going to have these ongoing commitments of time, of resources, of funding, that you're going to have to make sure that you are developing and maintaining trust within your your team, that you have a way built in to manage conflict and problems when they come up, that you know how to evaluate what it is that you're doing. Is there success? So are we doing this the right way still? Do we need to review our policies and procedures? Is something not working? This is never going to be a stagnant situation. Another thing that we see with strong MDTs is they keep their team members informed. So they have some function by which they share information, either they themselves provide education or they provide information that's relevant to their team about where they can find education. So you're going to want to think about professional development as well as cross-training. So if you have physicians and you hear about a really great training on elder abuse for physicians, letting them know about that. And if you see a training like something that we're doing at the Elder Justice Initiative, that's a cross-training, how physicians can participate on MDTs, what that collaboration looks like, to let them know about this cross-training piece that will work for everybody on your team. And then this is really, I think, maybe the key. You have to have trust. These relationships have to be in place in a way where you can talk to one another. If your team cannot talk, you're not going to get anything done. And the key to being able to have that open, honest dialogue is cultivating trust. So provide some way for your team to get to know each other personally, or encourage it at the very least. I mentioned before about saying hello to everybody and getting everybody's voice in the room. I know that people hate icebreakers. I hate icebreakers. Every time I go to a training and somebody says, we're going to start with an icebreaker, I get like a knot in my stomach. But they work. The goal is to get one another talking, get to know the people in the room, your colleagues more, and see them as individuals, flatten some of that power, and start developing trust, because nothing works better than just some little thing to get that conversation going. Another way to cultivate trust is having those strong, clear, and agreed upon collaboration documents. People can relax into their roles a little bit if they know what to expect and know what is expected of them. Active listening, trying to understand each other's perspectives, and asking for clarification when needed. So if something sounds off to you, don't assume that you know what the other team member is trying to say. Ask for clarification, because it can be, you could be speaking a really different language. There's some funny examples around this. And so I was in a team, and the social workers were talking with the psychologist, and they were saying, we really need to go get a mocha. And they were all very urgently talking about how they need to go get a mocha. And the police officer at the table was saying, why are you going out for coffee? He thought they were talking about a nice, delicious coffee mocha. But they were talking about a mental health status exam, of course. And so to ask for those clarification points are not always that comical and that easy to solve, but really listen in your meetings. Address problems and conflict head-on and properly. Hold one another accountable kindly. So if you come out of your meeting and you have marching orders, you know what is expected of you. Have somebody that's going to follow up on that. Ask at the next meeting for updates. Let people know in advance that you're going to be asking for updates, because everybody forgets something sometimes. So help support one another and hold one another accountable, but not in a shaming, blaming way, because nothing erodes trust quicker than shame and blame. One of the things I have seen teams do that is really challenging right now due to the epidemic that we're facing is coordinated home visits. So we do have teams, and we'll talk a little bit more about how they're adapting to working cases together in the community. And the other piece of cultivating trust is to remember why you're here and to keep the work focused on your clients rather than focusing on what your personal goals or agenda are. I think a lot of times on teams, you can have members who are thinking more about their political career, or thinking about how they're going to promote it in their organization. And that can make those individuals hard to work with. And if you're one of those individuals, it can make it hard for you to collaborate with others because you're not 100% present. You're not there. So we want to remember why we're there. And I've seen teams do this in a variety of ways. One of the most shocking and effective ways I have seen were to share pictures of the clients that they were talking about so that these conversations could not be so theoretical, so that you had to be grounded in helping this individual. So where your confidentiality agreements allow, your information policies allow, if you're doing case review and you're actually talking about clients, it can be really valuable to look at who you are talking about. So let's take a deep breath. That's a lot of information about what we know about strong teams. And that's all well and good, right? But now we're in this crazy new world. We're all dealing with COVID, and every industry is adapting. Every field is affected. Nobody's work is exactly the same. Nobody's personal life is exactly the same. And that's not just true for us, but around the world. And so I think a lot of teams are thinking, what do we do now? How do we adapt what we're doing to a new environment? Or how do we create a team in this environment? Where do we go from here? Because we're all just trying to keep our head above water. And I decided to lean back on my time in California and think about what it takes to be a good surfer. You want to learn how to ride those waves, right? And so if you were to go take surfing lessons, these are really the 5 things that they would be talking to you about, and they beautifully translate to the work that teams can do together. The first thing you need to have is determination. This is the will to persevere. Yes, this is a crazy environment. Yes, there are so many unknowns right now, but there are ways to proceed. There is a way to do the work that we need to do, and we can do it together. Balance. So balance, you've got to be able to stand up on that board. And with this, everything that we're dealing with right now, balance is even more critical than it ever was before. So there are several things that need to be balanced. One is that commitment to your standards of practice, right? So just because you're having to do things in a new way doesn't mean you compromise your standards of practice. Doesn't mean you throw out your policies and procedures. You adapt them. You make sure you're still upholding the principles of your profession. You maintain that commitment. And you have to balance that to the commitments that you have to your clients. So if you need to meet with your clients, if they need you now more than ever, if the way that you used to collaborate with them is so different, this is another piece that you're going to have to hold and balance. So your standards of practice, the needs of your clients, and yourself, your own self-care. The world of elder justice, elder abuse professionals in general, people who work with the older population, this can be a very challenging and sometimes draining field. You're dealing with awful, awful situations. You're trying to solve problems that seem unsolvable, and it can be very taxing on a good day. And right now, you're also experiencing everything that's happening in the world. Your personal life is being affected. Maybe you know somebody who is sick. Maybe you're working really hard to make sure that your older parents aren't affected. Nobody's personal life looks the same, and self-care is critical. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you are not going to be able to take care of your clients. And so really having that balance of your standards of practice, your clients, and your self-care are critical if you're going to stay afloat. Flexibility. You are going to have some flexibility in how we're doing things because the status quo is not working, and most people are saying nothing's ever going to be exactly the same. So we're going to have to look at ways that we can incorporate new technology, new partnerships that we're going to have to forge, new perspectives that we can bring into the work that we're doing, and we're going to have to be flexible about how we're meeting the goals that we have. Strength. Teams are strong because of the relationships that they have with their partners. So lean into that strength of togetherness. Lean into those relationships with your partners. And where there are relationships with your partners where things are off, where they're not quite right, really take the time to work on and strengthen those relationships, because right now it's going to be more critical than ever. And lastly, but not leastly, is endurance. These challenges may persist for a long time. Our world might not ever be exactly the same. The solutions that we come up with today might not work next month. They might not work in 3 months. They might not work in a year. We're going to have to examine what we're doing in an ongoing way. And we're going to have that commitment to persist. And that's what endurance is all about. So I'm really lucky that in my role, I get to talk to all kinds of multidisciplinary teams. And I thought that in this next section, I could bring to you some of the things that they are doing right now in this environment, and use them as examples of things that you should consider or you can consider with your team. So how are teams responding? So we have seen some teams decide to really shift their focus, and there are challenges that have emerged or become more pronounced because of the current crisis. And some of these areas include, but are not limited to, countering ageism, identifying gaps in the safety net, standards of care in long-term care facilities, developing safety and action plans for future similar emergencies. So we've seen some teams decide to put a pin in whatever work it is that they have been doing and focus on one of these underlying problems that they're seeing in their community, because there are so many issues or so many other pieces of the work that are built upon this structure that has these problems, where ageism is so prevalent, where all of a sudden they're seeing more clearly than ever these gaps in the social safety net. So some teams are shifting their focus entirely, and then we have other teams that are continuing or even deciding to begin taking on case review and seeing clients or serving clients. And this work has to be adaptive. So in this next section, we're going to talk about how those teams are adapting while they are continuing their client care. The first and most important piece, as everybody knows, you have your safety procedures to put in place. If you have to interact with older adults, using social distancing when you can, reducing the number of professionals who have to have face-to-face contact. Team coordination can really come into play here. You have MDTs where maybe law enforcement was looking to do an interview, where a social worker was looking to do an interview, where there's a psychologist that needs to get in and find out some things, where maybe a physician needs to look at medical records. I mean, there's so many things that could be happening, and so many professions that need to have an interaction with your client to move a case forward. But as a team, you can try to coordinate that so that you can have one individual glean as much of that information as possible, or to look for other ways to get that information. So either having one member go out and see how much of that information they can bring back to the team to minimize how many people are interfacing face-to-face with the client, trying to stay better connected through phone calls or video calls, triaging cases so that in-person contact only occurs in cases of emergencies. What has to be done right now, and what can we work on in a more long-term fashion, where we can move more slowly in getting those pieces together, because there's not this element of something emergent. If you're going to triage cases and only have contact in emergencies, defining what those emergency situations are, what are the emergency needs, what are the conditions for contact, so that everybody can be on the same page, so that they're not defining it themselves and being unsure about when they should go out and see clients. And then practicing safe contact. If you do have to see clients, it's just using gloves, safe distances, masks, etc. And the CDC has lots of information around that piece. But then we've all sort of been thrown into this brave new world, as this conference can attest to in and of itself, of having to work remotely and doing teleconferencing, video conferencing, taking things to the web. And so this can be a very challenging piece and new to most people in this field, I believe. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do we do this and how do we do it correctly and effectively. So the first piece is choosing a platform to collaborate on. So I want you all to know that this doesn't have to be completely daunting. You may have partners that already have teleconferencing software or are already utilizing it. You might be able to come together as a team to share the cost around getting established on a platform. Also, as a team, you can think about what platforms your team members are used to using to try to flatten some of that learning curve when people are interfacing with new technology. And you might have a lead agency that can contribute in kind. They might have a license to use any of the big teleconferencing software, and they can take the lead on coordinating and facilitating meetings because of that. Looking for ways that you can collaborate on those platforms, developing those platforms. And then here's the big piece, right? How do we do this correctly? So here's something to consider around confidentiality. Most video conferencing platforms have HIPAA compliant for-pay tiers. Most conferencing platforms have HIPAA compliant for-pay tiers. If you are using any basic service, any sort of your Zoom or, oh goodness, now I'm like Skype or any of these basic video conferencing software, using a I'm going to call you, you're going to call me free feature is not HIPAA compliant. But those organizations and others have HIPAA compliant tiers. They have been working with other disciplines and other fields and other businesses, particularly in the medical field, for some time. And so we can learn from what they have been doing and ride the coattails of the work that they have been doing. So make sure that you're getting together and you are talking to the technical support with those for those platforms, deciding which tier is appropriate for the work you're doing. If you're going to be sharing client information, you're going to need something that's HIPAA compliant. If you are not going to be talking about clients, but you have other information that needs to be kept in a protected fashion, maybe you're talking about policy, maybe you're doing something that has to do with the procedures or policies of the various agencies in your community, and you need to make sure that you've got good encryption on both sides when you have those conversations. Make sure that you are talking to them about what their HIPAA compliant tier is, because that's where you're going to find the most security. I think we've probably all heard about security breaches when people are starting using these video conferencing platforms and other teleconferencing platforms. But almost all of those breaches have happened because the users are not complying with the security protocols. So there are protocols that you have to follow so that you are employing the proper technology to secure your communications. So for example, if I were to have you in my contact list and we're both on Skype or something like that, and I say, hey, I'm going to call you at noon, and I call you and you answer, or if I'm doing that on Zoom, there's not as much security as if I were to set up a meeting and send out a meeting invite that has a link, and everybody goes to that link and they wait in a waiting room like you did today until you're accepted into your meeting. There are these various levels of security in functioning that way that are in place. And if you're following those protocol, you're going to have a lot more security in your team. So comply with the security protocol of the technology that you are using. Look for your HIPAA compliant tiers. Make sure that you're using the right tier for the work you're going to be doing. Comply with the security protocol. And consider adding language to your confidentiality agreements to cover remote communication. So if you have confidentiality agreements already in place, the people, the team, the attorneys, whoever it was that was on those task force or those committees to develop those confidentiality agreements, have them look at adding language or adjusting language if you need, where you are making sure that you are saying that not just information that's shared in a meeting is confidential, but that information that is shared across any platform is confidential. However you receive the information working as a team, that you are going to protect that information. You're going to have your confidentiality agreements reflect that. We've seen several teams who have put these pieces into place so that they can talk about their clients more freely in their work. So I touched upon some of these enhancing security tips, but there are many of them. If your security platform allows you to use waiting rooms, learn how to do that. That means that nobody can just pop into your meeting. They have to have an invitation and they have to wait for you to accept them. So if you see somebody who's waiting in a waiting room and they're not a part of your team, you don't let them in. You can also, in these waiting rooms, display your confidentiality agreement language. There's usually a place to put an image up while people are waiting, a slide up while people are waiting for the meeting to start. And that can be another way to reinforce your confidentiality agreement. You can also utilize group chat to confirm that participants have read, understood, and agreed to the confidentiality statement. You can kick participants for non-compliance. Some teams are using chat records of that, of just that piece to protect their confidentiality, to have have a record of people saying, yes, they are understanding and committed to their confidentiality statement. And then there are your just basic technology considerations for enhancing security. So do not use open Wi-Fi. That means if the Wi-Fi that you have connected to does not have a password on it, it's not secure. If it's in your home, add a password to your Wi-Fi. As soon as you put that password in your devices, it will remember it. It's only going to be burdensome the first time. But it's really critical that nobody else can get onto your Wi-Fi while you're using it. Don't hold calls in public spaces. Now, you would think that that wouldn't really be an issue right now, but it is, because there are, well, a lot of us are working from home. There are professions that do not have that luxury. You've got law enforcement in the field, nurses in the field, social workers in the field, doctors, anybody in the medical field in the field. So depending on who you have in your team, you might have people who are confined to their home and who are not supposed to leave, and those who have to be in the field. And so if you are one of those members, or if you have members who have to be in the field, making sure that during the time that you're having your meetings, they're able to step out of a public space and to meet privately. Another thing to do is to keep your software updated. And I'm sorry if this seems like a lot of minutia, but it's so critical that these little details are considered when you're setting up these teams, because there's so many ways for there to be holes in these systems. You have to understand how to keep your information safe. A lot of people put off doing software updates. I do it a lot because I'm trying to work and I don't want to stop what I'm doing for an update, and then I forget to do it, schedule it for overnight or whatever. But right now, more than ever, it's critical that you keep your software updated, especially if it is these communication platforms, if there are updates for that software, because there are constantly patches and updates that are going to help keep your platform secure. So anytime something is breached or they discover a hole in their security, they're sending out lots of updates. You may have noticed that you're getting more software updates than you have before. So keep your software updated to stay safe, and to stay current with the protocols and professional guidelines within your own profession, because some of those pieces are changing and adapting. So make sure that you understand what those are, and then you're asking those in charge if you don't understand those protocols. And this can be a funny little piece of it, but now we have all these people who are teleconferencing and video conferencing who've never done it before, and it's a brave new world. And I think if any of you are on social media, you've probably seen some things go viral of, etiquette breaches and people doing really silly, awful things on these calls, and then especially if they're doing it without their security in place, and their security protocols updated, they can go viral. So here's some etiquette for having these virtual meetings. Test your audio and video ahead of time. If you're going to do video conferencing, make sure your face is lit and visible. So don't have your light sources behind you. There's your photography 101. Your light source needs to be in front of you, not behind you, so your face is visible. Unless you just really want to creep out your team and be the face in the shadows and let them wonder whose voice that is. You're going to want to make sure your face is lit. I can't emphasize this enough. Don't take your devices with you into the bathroom. Pretend like you're really meeting in person, and have all of those same perspectives in place, and do the things that you would do if you were really in person, and don't do the things you wouldn't do if you were in person. I think that there was recently a judge, I believe it was a judge or somebody, that took their phone to the bathroom, and then everybody heard them flushing the toilet, and it was all over. It was on the news. I don't know how that's news, but in any case, it was really widely broadcasted. People thought it was quite funny. You don't want to be that guy. Mute your line when you aren't speaking, and then remember that you've muted yourself, and unmute yourself when you are speaking. Come prepared. Don't multitask, and be respectful of time. If you're going to have these, oh wait, there's one more that I should throw in there because this came up recently. Don't green screen yourself. If you have any concerns about security breaches, don't green screen yourself. So that's when you either literally have a green screen behind you, or you're using one of those features to put pretty scenery behind you when you're talking, because maybe your office doesn't look as professional as you would like. Skip that, cut everybody some slack, look at their kitchen. It's going to be fine. But don't put these green screens behind you, because if there were a security breach, you are immediately memeable, because they can take that background out and put any background in so easily. So don't do that to yourself. Okay, so if you're going to be working remotely, you need to have training. You need to train your members to make sure they all understand how to use these new tools and resources. So it's going to be incumbent upon someone to establish what technology you're going to use, to make sure you have consensus about what technology you're going to use, and then to make sure everybody understands how to use that technology. So you've got to get Barb up to date on how to get her camera on. You got to make sure that everybody knows that they have to have their security passwords on their Wi-Fi. And you have to give your team some space to learn this, right? Your first meeting or a couple of meetings might really be more about how are we doing this than actually digging into the work. You might be like, hey, can we get everybody online? Does everybody understand how to use these security features? Can everybody practice using the various features that we're going to use, chat or video conferencing or sharing documents or whatever it is, sharing your screen, to kind of go through that together. And then there are lots of other collaborative tools outside of video and teleconferencing, like using shared calendars. A lot of people who haven't done that before are looking for shared calendars so they can stay up with what their team is doing and when they can collaborate. You might be jumping on listservs, so you can have emails that are going out to everybody on your team. Instant messaging, people are using instant messaging to try to stay connected with those who have to work in the field and those who are back in the office or the home environment, using cloud computing or sharing working documents. So there's lots of ways and lots of tools to help you work remotely. Telehealth is a whole other ball of wax. And I am not an expert on telehealth. So what I'm going to tell you is just where you can go to get some good information. Everything that we've talked about with video conferencing and teleconferencing applies to telehealth considerations. This is when you're not only going to be having virtual meetings with members, but you're going to have virtual meetings with clients. So you might have a doctor on your team who's going to meet with them virtually. You may have done this with some of your doctors now. Suddenly everybody can do these telehealth calls where before you couldn't get a telehealth appointment. So if you're going to be communicating with your clients, then you're really going to have to make sure that you have everything in place for your HIPAA compliance, and it can be complicated. This is a critical thing that you do. So there are lots of places you can go to get some information. There are two that I recommend. One is techsafety.org. So there not only is there information about telehealth, but there's information about using technology in your work in a safe way. They have really broad information. And they are focused on the domestic violence teams. And actually, both of these resources came out of the world of domestic violence. And so they worked on that confidentiality piece a lot over time. Also, reachingvictims.org, they held a series of strategy sessions. I think there are 5 strategy sessions that they have recorded that are online that you can find at this link. You can listen in, you can watch them, you can read the transcripts of their conversations about how do you stay connected with your clients, particularly clients who are being abused or have been abused. How do you maintain your relationships with them? How do you communicate with them when you can't see them in person? If you are facilitating meetings, in general, these tips are good tips, but particularly if you are doing virtual meetings, here are some tips for you. The first one I'm going to mention that might be newer to folks is sharing technical responsibility. So if you're going to have virtual meetings, you might have one person who's going to run the meeting and then another person who's going to be the tech person, so that you're not trying to run a meeting and do the technical component at the same time. So if somebody's having trouble with their video or they can't hear, that you have somebody who can help them with that in a chat. Somebody who's maybe going to read the chat messages like we're doing today on this webinar. Somebody else is reading the chat questions that you're putting in, and she's going to read them to me at the end, and then we're going to have a conversation that way. So looking how you can share responsibilities so it's not all on one person, because it's a lot to run a virtual meeting. Even though we're having these virtual meetings, I think it's still important that you're communicating outside of the meeting. So making sure you're staying current with your team, that you know what everybody's working on, that you're maintaining those relationships is more critical now than ever, that you're complying with agreed upon protocols. So there are lots of things here that you can draw on for any sort of meeting, but those are the ones that really I think are the most important right now. And I will let you look through the ones that apply more to in-person meetings. Here are some resources that I wanted to put out to you. A few of them are COVID specific. Then we have our MDT webpage within the justice.gov. So justice.gov/elderjustice/MDT. You go there, we have lots of really useful stuff. We've got our webinars that we've had. We've got our guidance toolkit. We have the MDT map that I mentioned before. We have information about how to contact us for consultations, information about funding sources for coordinators, just a lot of stuff there. So do visit us. And if you are going to be holding these virtual meetings, check in with Tech Safety and Reaching Victims. I'm going to pause here for questions. I know this is a lot of information, and so I wanted to open it up and see if we could start going through some of those questions that may have come in now.
Sure. We do have some questions that have come in. We have one. Let me see. Here we go. Can you share some concrete ideas for keeping the team moving from storming to norming? A lot of people give up before they can get to norming.
Well, I think the most concrete thing that you can do is communicate about what's happening. You need to have open conversation about what you are doing and why you're in this stage to help motivate people to stay in it. One of the things I have seen teams do that I really like is to host little working retreats. When you're in the storming stage, there's nothing that I have seen that has worked better than bringing everybody together for a working retreat. And if you bring everybody together, you can do things like doing a SWOT exercise, so examining the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats. So your strengths and your weaknesses are the internal things that you're struggling with. The opportunities and the threats are the external things that your team is struggling with. So you want to look at those internal influences that you're going to need to work through, as well as those external, and just putting all of those up on the boards and looking at them together as a team can be a way to kind of break through and have a creative aha about how you can navigate some of this. Another thing I think is really critical when you're doing a working retreat like this, and even if you're not, do this at some point with your team. It's such a healthy thing to do. Let your team members tell one another the one thing they wish the other professions understood about their work. There's a lot of misunderstanding in the elder justice world about what each profession can and can't do, what their daily work life looks like, the influence that they may have, the laws that govern their work. There can be so much misunderstanding. I see this a lot with APS and law enforcement, what they can and can't do, what their restrictions are legally, and then practically, their staffing, their funding. And so coming together to see what it is that they all wish the other knew about the work that they were doing. And this can also humanize individuals, because it's really easy to blame Sally for not going out on a case when you don't understand that maybe Sally's a social worker, the client has refused services, they are a voluntary service agency. If you are of sound mind, you can refuse services, etc. Or if you don't understand why law enforcement can't go out and make an arrest, we may have many laws that are that provide the steps and the policies and the procedure for how they would go about doing that function that you don't understand, as well as with prosecuting. So if there can be a lot of misunderstanding about the type of evidence that a prosecutor has to have to even file on a case. So bringing those professions together and ask them to talk about the hard stuff. What is it they wish that the other professions knew about what they were doing, and really allow them some space to voice those things, and without judgment. In each profession around the table, go around the table and talk about that. I think a lot of really rich material comes out of those two pieces. Also, educate your team about the stages of team formation, because if you're in it and you don't know what it is, it feels really scary. And I've been there. So you're struggling and you don't know why you're struggling, and it's helpful if somebody gives you a roadmap, right? And they say, this is where we're trying to go, this is where we are, we will get there. Stay with us on this journey. It can be very orienting for professions. And I think a lot of professions are really designed to be more solitary. Lawyers in particular, you are looking at your case law, you're developing your case, then you might have people on your prosecution team, you have some internal sharing, but really so much of the work is internal. It's, you bringing your knowledge, your skill set, your mind to a problem, and you're not used to having all of these other influences, external influence, talking about their needs, right? You're looking at just the facts. What can you prove? And a lot of disciplines are that way. They're more internally focused. And so your team is going to have to learn how to hold that professional perspective, and then to develop these lenses to look at their cases from the perspective of these other professions as well. And this is a process that some people call developing a forensic lens, because you're not just looking at something from your professional perspective, but if you are working continually and really in the work, participating in the work with other professions, you're going to learn so much about what they do, you're never going to do your job the same way. And that's a good thing, because you're going to be able to look at elder abuse and look at the social situation, You're going to be able to go, like say that you go into a client's home and you don't have a social worker background, maybe you're law enforcement or from the medical field. Social workers have a really unique way of walking in that home and assessing that environment. They're looking for, are the clients eating? Are their medications up to date? Are they taking their medications? Anybody caring for them? They're going to examine the client's skin if they're bedbound. They're going to talk and know how to talk to the family. This is really different than law enforcement coming in and looking for evidence of a crime. I think a lot of the conflict around law enforcement and other people who go into the home is that law enforcement can feel like they might inadvertently mess up a crime scene. You know, if there is elder abuse that is a crime, how do you not disturb the scene and bring the right people in to evaluate it? Especially if you go into the home and you didn't know that it was an emergency like this. A lot of times you go in because of a well-being check or whatever it might be, and then you discover evidence of abuse. So working together, you can develop this sort of forensic lens, and that is something that can help team members coalesce together, perform better together, because it's going to break down those barriers between the various professions and enable you to see this client in a more holistic way, to see the work in a more holistic way, because you're going to be looking at from all these perspectives at one time while still holding onto the core of your professional standards and practices. I hope those things are useful. And if you have a team that is stuck in one of these stages and you're needing some help, know that you can call the phone number, or really email me is the best way. And I'm happy to talk to your team and provide some consultation around your challenges.
Okay. And one of our other attendees has a question and wonders if you have any idea of how many MDTs there are across the United States and in North Carolina, and if there are any stats available on MDTs.
So this is the very reason why we're developing the MDT, or the the Elder Justice Network map. So it's up and it's live on our website. We don't have a lot of teams listed yet. I think we have about 200 and something, around almost 300 teams listed. Here's what we know about MDTs. Nobody has been tracking how many multidisciplinary teams there are working on this issue. I get calls from journalists every year wanting to know this very basic piece of information. Previously in the field, what we have done is looked at funding streams. So we said, okay, we know OVC funded this project that had 15 teams, and we know that the National Center on Elder Abuse funded this group of financial abuse teams, and there were this many numbers of them. And we were trying to look at where we found the funding and piece together who those people were that were doing that work and where they were. It's not a good way of trying to track information. And so this is a project to try to get at that very question. Who's working in elder justice? Where are they? How do we collaborate with one another? So just providing that basic information. If you have a team, I really encourage you, I implore you to add your team to our map. If you go on our website, you'll see how to do that. Some really just short, basic information that you send to me, and then we populate it. We know that there are so many more teams than anybody ever expected or thought of. I thought that I was alone in the work when I was first started 15 years ago, and I think a lot of people still feel very siloed in their work. But there are states that have MDTs in every county or every jurisdiction. So Tennessee has states has MDTs that are run out of every prosecutor's office. So wherever the prosecutor jurisdiction is, that they have that many teams. We have Ohio has, I think, 82 multidisciplinary teams for just elder abuse. So we have states that have a lot of teams that are mandated teams that are working in every county, and that's hundreds and hundreds of more teams than I ever knew were out there in the beginning. So we're trying to pull all that information together in one place because it's critical, because you may very well have teams that are working in your community that you could collaborate with or share resources with, particularly if you are working in rural communities and you may not have access to a forensic accountant or any other specialist that you need for your team, but another team might have that one, might have the access to that profession. And so looking how you can share resources, that's something that they are doing very successfully in upstate New York. They have a forensic accountant that they are sharing, I think, among 5 or 7 counties. And so they put their cases in queue when they need a forensic evaluation. She does the paperwork on each one and gives them her analysis. And they share other professions in that way as well, like a neuropsychologist, somebody who can do those psychological evaluations, really good psychological evaluations. So if you know who's around you, you can look at ways of sharing resources.
Thank you, Talitha. We have another question. Can the MDT be fluid? Change priorities and directions when it seems to be needed? What happens with long-term members who might not want to change direction?
Yeah, I would say right now your MDT has to be fluid. If you're going to continue this work, you're going to have to make adaptations. There's no way around it. And change is always highly resisted. And there might be members who resist it even more right now if they don't like change, because change is happening everywhere. They're having a lot of change in their personal life, in their community, and at work, and it can be overwhelming to have so many changes and to not have your grounding in how we've always done things, right? That can be very reassuring to teams at times. So yes, you do have to have some fluidity. Some ideas about how to handle that would be to form committees around particular topics. So if you make a determination, you're going to have changes in a policy or changes in a procedure, get a group to kind of hash that out and bring it to your larger team to see if you want to make adaptations that way.
All right. Our final question that I have is, do you think it's possible that a team member wouldn't be able to participate in the MDT virtual meeting due to new agency requirements?
That a member wouldn't be able to participate because of new agency requirements. It is possible that you could have an agency that disallows communication, virtual communication. I mean, that is a possibility. I would hate to see that happen. And if that were happening on my team, I think that it would be one of the ways that we'd be shifting and being fluid in the work that we were doing would be to try to bring those partners in for conversations about how we can do this correctly, what the barriers are, why they are seeing this as such a challenge that they don't even want to touch it. Because there are people doing this work in every discipline. Law enforcement is doing virtual meetings, social workers are doing virtual meetings, doctors are doing telehealth. Everybody's adapting. And so if you have an agency that is overwhelmed, it's probably more of being overwhelmed about how to do it correctly and not wanting to do it wrong and compromise their clients. So bring them to the table and have that be the focus of your team at this time. So yes, let's be fluid. Let's bring everybody to the table and let's talk about how to do it right and reach out for help to those agencies that who are currently doing it. So if you want to know if somebody who's doing telehealth, give me a call and let me know, and I can try to make a connection for you, or whatever it is, that whatever perceived barrier, there's somebody in this field who is working around it. And so let's try to collaborate with one another and look at how we can do it correctly. That would be my tip. Are there any other thoughts or questions or things that are coming up for anyone now, or anything I need to clarify? I know I moved through kind of quickly.
I don't have any other questions or comments that have been chatted to me at this time.
Okay, so I'm going to hand the screen back to Rhonda.
Talitha, while you're doing that, hi, this is Nancy Warren. I just want to thank you so very much. Gosh, I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person because it's been really it's this good of a PowerPoint and a virtual presentation. I feel like the energy that we could have generated in a face-to-face opportunity with all the folks that have been on this call plus others who have interest in this area and are trying to go through things and make things work. The energy would have been fabulous. So we're going to give you a virtual clap. Everybody clap right now. Thank you. Give a little whistle. Thank you, Talitha, for a wonderful presentation. Lots of food for thought. And your PowerPoint presentation is on our website so that people can look at it afterward. And as I'm not sure, but I just want to mention that we have it recorded now, and we can make it available to folks also so that they can re-listen if there was a part, if the children started acting up in the house and you wanted to go back and re-listen to it, we'll have it available. But I do hope that we'll be able to meet you face to face in the future. We look forward to it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. And if you think of anything else that you need from me as your teams take this information back into the community, let me know. I'm happy to be of service.
Great. Thank you. What a resource. Thank you very much. I hope people will take you up on the offer of assistance. This is good. The other thing I want to mention to people is that we will be, I don't know, Rhonda, if you have your screen back yet now. Yep, you do. I want to mention to people that, right, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We are going to be sending out a survey in response to this presentation, and we will have certificates if you complete the survey. We'll send you a certificate as a way of saying thank you for helping us out. Let me see here. Our very next item is our annual meeting, but before we do that, since you've, at least I have been sitting for the last, quietly for the last couple of hours, I need a break. And so I'm going to take it's 11:30, I think. That's what my clock says. If we can take we'll come back together it says 11:40 on the agenda that's on the screen in front of you. I hope you all will stay for the annual meeting. It won't be all that long. We have some information to share with you all. I see participants are leaving. It's lunchtime, I realize that, but you'll stay and join us for our annual meeting, but we'll take a little break and we'll get back started at 11:40, just like it says on the agenda. How about that? Does that sound good to everybody?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, that's what I thought I'd hear. So
Executive committee members, Rhonda has unmuted your phone. You may want to mute your own personal line until we get started back.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll start back up at 11:40. Please join us for the annual meeting. We've got some exciting information to share at the meeting, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a few minutes. Thank you. Thanks again, Talitha.
Thank you.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Rhonda?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I imagine he may have taken a little break.
Oh, Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am here. This is Nancy. I'm here, and I'll be ready to start the meeting in just 1 minute. Okay, my computer clock says 11:40, and so I'm going to go ahead and start our meeting. This is Nancy Warren. I want to welcome everyone to our annual meeting. I want to thank all of you who have stayed on the call to participate in the annual meeting and maybe learn a little bit more about the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse. And I want to thank you all for participating. I thought that the webinar this morning was, even as long as I've been participating in webinars and MDTs over many, many years, it's just refreshing to get all excited again about it, even in this very unusual time where we have to really think, get a new box to think outside of. So, welcome, and those, I guess, are my opening comments, unless someone on the executive committee can redirect me. I want to take a moment of profession or privilege, I guess, as the chair. I'm chair for a little while longer, and I want to thank a couple of executive committee folks who will be leaving the executive committee this year. And I just can't tell you what monumental, fabulous contributors they are to the partnership. And that's Joan Pelletier. I want to thank you, Joan, for everything that you have done and contributed. Boy, when you agreed to be the chair for a couple of years and served also as the past chair on the executive committee, I don't know if you really knew exactly what you were diving into, but you dove in anyway, and I just can't thank you enough. I look forward to you continuing to participate with us as we move forward. And the other member of the executive committee that I just want to thank, who's going to be leaving us after she finishes all her minutes for all the meeting, is Laura Jett. Laura, thank you so much. I don't know, for those of you who are participating in this meeting, if you've ever been the beneficiary of Laura Jett's work, at least as a secretary and as organizing thinking and thoughts and keeping track of people and who's talking and what they said. Laura, you've done a fabulous job, and I just really want to thank you personally for all the effort and time and energy that you've devoted to the partnership. So, thinking about Laura Jett, the meeting minutes of our last meeting, which was held January 15th, are available on our website. And I have them in front of me here. Laura, do you want to say something about this?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you all. The minutes are posted on the website, and for everyone's benefit, that was last held on January 15th, so I know that's been a long time ago. So I just wanted to give a quick recap of that meeting. We did have our speaker that day, that was Colin Austin, who spoke to us. He's a private practice attorney, and he shared information on preventing elder abuse through strong estate planning. After his presentation, we were introduced to Jim Motzinger at that meeting, and he presented the partnership with a check for $2,291. And that was to advance the efforts of our partnership. That money came from the former North Carolina Adult Protective Services Association that he was a member of. And so we were grateful to receive that check at our meeting. We also met Allison Costanza, the new executive director for the NC Coalition on Aging. So that's just some highlights from the January meeting. And I would just like to take a moment to say I've really enjoyed being the secretary for the past 2 years. I will be stepping away, but I'll continue to be an active member. The partnership has done really great things the past 2 years. Best committee I've ever worked with. You have a lot of engaged folks working on the executive committee. I've really enjoyed the partnerships and the strengthening of the advocacy efforts of everyone on that team. So thank you so much for having me.
Okay. I'll take, I think what I'll do is I'll take, because all of you all are not unmuted, but the executive committee is, if you have any concerns about the minutes, if you can share that with Laura or with me, we will make those corrections. But otherwise, I'd like to entertain a motion perhaps from a member of the executive committee to approve the meeting minutes of January 15th, 2020.
This is John Marin. I move that we accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
By Kevin.
Okay, great, thank you. And is there anyone who is opposed to that? Great, okay, thanks. Then we'll move on to the business of our treasurer's report. Pam Palmer, I think you're around and available.
Nancy, this is Kevin. Would you want to run through the executive committee?
I do.
Slides first before Pam?
Yeah, I just saw that fly up there, and I thought, oop, I've gotten myself out of order. Pam, can you come for a minute? Kevin did this great slideshow for us, and I thank him very much for doing this. We thought you might want to see our faces this morning. I'll let everybody introduce themselves. This is a picture of me. I don't know. I know there's somebody else on this call who remembers exactly where we were about almost a year ago. That's why I have such a beaming smile, is because I was on a Rhine River cruise. And I have loved being the chair of this partnership, and thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Joan. Nancy, thank you for the kind words, and I'm going to miss being actively involved with the committee. I look forward to following up with your good work in the coming years.
Great.
Hi, this is Laura Cockman. I'm your chair-elect, and I just want to say it has indeed been interesting being part of this partnership. The collaborative spirit that exists here is just amazing. Thank you.
Hi, Pam Palmer, the treasurer, and I'm also co-chair of the communications committee. So you get a lot of stuff from me. I do most of the posting on Facebook if you follow us there.
Hi, that's me, Laura Jett, your outgoing secretary.
Hi there, I'm Laura Slawbaugh. I am Communications Co-Chair Committee, and I help update the website and send out emails.
Hi, I'm Chevelle Mavens. I'm the co-chair of the Educational Committee, and I help put speakers list together and for our conference.
Good morning. This is Ann Elmore. It's my pleasure to serve with Chevelle Mavens as co-chair of the Education Committee. Look forward to seeing your recommendations regarding speakers and topics as we move forward. It's been a wonderful educational opportunity and an opportunity to do lots of good. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to working with you in the year ahead.
Good morning, Kevin Robertson. I'm the chair for the nominations committee currently.
Hi, I'm John Marin. I'm with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office and co-chair along with Stephanie Bias of the Awareness Committee. I just want to say that I'm saddened that Joan and Laura are both leaving. They've been wonderful members to work with, and I've enjoyed our time together in the executive committee, and really appreciate all the work that they have done. So thanks a lot, and enjoy having a little more time off.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Bias, and I work with the Department of Insurance with the SHIP Division, and I am also the co-chair of the NCP AAA Awareness Committee. And John and I do a lot of speaking, and Ann and Kevin have helped us, and we go across the state educating folks about our particular areas of expertise. And we always mention the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse. We feel it's a very important effort, and we are delighted to and honored to be your co-chairs of the Awareness Committee.
All right. It's a handsome group, isn't it? It's a wonderful group of people. Yeah. All right. Okay, Pam Palmer, you want to say something about the treasurer's report and the budget estimate for the coming year?
Okay. There we go. Everybody can see it on their screen if you're on the web computer. We had total membership dues income of $685. We had two wonderful sponsorships this year. One from NCEA PSA of $2,291.36, and then the North Carolina Department of Insurance $2,000, which is wonderful. So we had a total income of $4,976.36. We had very minimal expenses this year because we didn't have the comp. We joined the North Carolina Coalition on Aging, so that was $200 due. We did a sponsorship of $100, post office box 154, website 120. We did have a few conference expenses because we went on and applied for the CEUs, which we were not able to use, and we had PayPal fees. So taking out our $3,000 reserve, we had a balance of $12,991. And then on our budget estimate, that's kind of an iffy thing. So it all depends on a lot of issues, but we are anticipating membership dues of $1,550, and we're anticipating conference income of $6,000, so a total income of $7,550. Pretty much the same type of expenses. And we're anticipating total expenses of $7,434.00 with an excess of $116. Any questions?
I know the folks who are attending the meeting can't pose a verbal question, but certainly if you have a question, Rhonda Naron, our host, is still available. And if you have a question that you'd like to pose to Pam, either about our current state of affairs or our projected, please feel free to ask that in the chat box to host, and we'll try, and Rhonda will ask us those questions.
We don't currently have any questions.
Okay, all right. Then we'll just have a motion to accept the treasurer's report then.
John Marin makes that motion.
Okay, thank you very much, John. So we have accepted the treasurer's report. All right, and the next item on our agenda, let me just see here. Oh, must be election results, right? So Laura Cockman, you're going to talk to us about election results.
I am. Kevin Robertson, I just want to say, is normally the chair of this committee, but because he was actually on the ballot, I'm going to step in and speak for the committee this time. We did elect a chair-elect who is Kevin Robertson. Thank you, Kevin, for stepping up to the plate. And I do want to mention that the election results were unanimous. So all these folks were elected by you members, and we appreciate your participation. Laura Slabach is our new secretary, and Pam Palmer will remain as treasurer. So thank you guys so much.
Yay!
That's right. Thank you very much. And of course, Laura Cockman will begin her her reign as the chair. Yeah, it's glorious, Laura. You'll like it. It's glorious.
I'm sure it's glorious, Nancy.
Yeah, it has a lot of glory to it. And I think that all begins in July, but you know what? We're pretty fluid about all that. So at any rate, I'm looking forward to that, and I'll be continuing to serve on the executive committee as the immediate past chair. So that's great. Thank you all very much for your service. I appreciate that. I do want to mention another item on the agenda that is, I'm trying to look at it here. Oh, hey.
Nancy,
Hey.
maybe Laura will.
We surprised Nancy with this slide. Nancy, we're sorry that we can't honor you in person today, but we did want to do it via our web here. And we appreciate your leadership, all your advocacy efforts, all your hard work, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on the executive committee. And just so you know, our next in-person meeting, you'll get a proper farewell. Thanks, Nancy, for everything.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nancy. You've been a good leader this last year. Well, actually 2, I guess. So really appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Great, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love this picture. I am so happy in that picture. It just makes me laugh when I see it.
Cruising down the line might make you happy.
Indeed. I do want to make sure everybody knows that we have, let me see here, the annual report. We publish every year an annual report. It's just a compilation of what the organization has been up to all year. It is available on the website. I don't know if there was anything in particular that any of you committee chairs wanted to bring up or mention in particular that the members might want to know about. You can certainly pull it up and take a read if you like to. The organization stays very busy, and it's really all for the purposes of serving our mission, which is right at the top of the annual update. And just to remind everybody, the mission of the partnership is to promote safe communities for older adults and adults with disabilities in North Carolina through prevention, recognition, protection, and prosecution of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And we do that by raising awareness, offering education, advocacy, and access to a network of other professionals. So, boy, it's quite an organization, and I appreciate that. Okay. All right. I guess we're. Let me just see here where I am. Okay. I'm looking at the agenda. I've got, I did want to mention before we get to the upcoming dates of interest that this survey that we will be sending you, we want your program and training ideas. The survey is not just about today's effort at offering you an educational opportunity via this webinar, but it's also about where are we going to head for the coming year. And we really, 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 as always, want your participation. So just be aware that that will be coming to you in the coming days, maybe, I don't know, maybe next week or something like that. I don't know. Pam will be, is that right, Pam? You'll be doing that?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just some upcoming dates. I know y'all are familiar with this, but I just want to mention that June 15th, of course, is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and probably many of you had made plans for how you were going to celebrate. We have some great, in years past, people have done great walks and all kinds of events, but I know that that's not exactly how you're going to be celebrating this year. And I just got an email actually about the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day 2020 webinar, which is called Upholding Justice for Older Americans, a National Conversation. We'll try to make this information available to you all so that you can register for this, but it is going to be held on Monday, June the 15th at 10 a.m., 10 to 11:30. And so it'll be a great way to stay informed too about World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. We do want to hear about your ideas of what you've got coming up in order to celebrate World Elder Abuse Awareness. We want you to share your plans, however you've changed them. Thank you very much, Rhonda. Take photos, share ideas, hashtag your, I'm speaking out of total ignorance here, hashtag your photos and ideas, like the partnership's Facebook page so that you can share your ideas on that, and we will be trying to celebrate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I understand from Carrie Perez at the Division of Aging and Adult Services that the governor has signed a World Elder Abuse Awareness proclamation like he usually does, and so hopefully we'll be able to post that at some point in time soon too. So, okay. Let me see, it's 12:01. What am I forgetting? Oh, I just want to mention, yeah, our next meeting is the next meeting of the partnership will be Wednesday, July 15th. We've secured our speakers for that day. Ann Elmore, do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. We have two speakers that we are delighted to have, and they will speak about elder exploitation and more under cover of authority, guardianship, powers of attorney, that kind of thing. And our speakers will be Assistant District Attorney Jessica Spencer, as well as Charlotte Ann Alexander, a private practitioner in the field. So please join us for that very information-packed, useful seminar on July 15th.
Yeah, and we're not sure, it will most likely be virtual. I have a hard time imagining us being able to meet anytime soon, but maybe, you know, I don't know, a couple of us, but I think we'll be able to make this presentation, this workshop, this particular meeting, a virtual meeting. Wouldn't you say, Laura Cockman, who will be chairing that day?
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, I think in all likelihood it will be a virtual meeting, but we'll certainly let you all know on our webpage.
Laura Jett, I don't know if you can say anything about the Southeast 4A conference. It's supposed to be the end of August, the 1st of September.
Not at this time. I think they're still trying to work that out and see if they can still host that. So I think we're still waiting on some things there.
Let us know, you know, when you know about it so that we can let our folks know. The National APS Association Annual Conference is in November. I think it's quite likely that that actual conference will be virtual. It's supposed to be held in Michigan in November, and honestly, I wasn't all that thrilled about going to Michigan in November, but I was going to do it anyway. But I'm hearing that they are going to offer this conference virtually, so this might be a great opportunity for many people, many APS professionals in North Carolina to be able to participate in the NAPSA conference without having the travel expenses. So I'll be sure to let you know as this progresses. Are there any other issues or concerns or items of business that we need to conduct here in our annual meeting? All right. Well, congratulations. I don't know, we didn't do our little swearing in of our new officers of the organization, but we will assume that they are on board and ready to serve, and hope to see them in the flesh soon, as soon as possible. And I hope you all stay well, and look forward to seeing you all. Thank you so much for your participation today and your support of the partnership. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Rhonda, I just want to thank you so very much. Couldn't have done it without you. And Kevin, you sure made it easy to do.
You're very welcome.
You're so welcome.
Look
It's our
forward to
pleasure to help out.